3 cycles ago, the Galactic Council sealed every record about the Third Expansion War, not classified, not restricted. Sealed, as in, welded shut behind quantum locks that would take a star's death to break open. The official reason: maintaining galactic peace and stability. The real reason: well, that's what got 9 foolish students expelled from the most prestigious military academy in known space. Korvac should have known better. As a Velian tactical prodigy, her crystalline brain could process battlefield scenarios faster than most species could blink. But curiosity, that damnable trait that plagued every sentient race, had its claws deep in her thoughts. The mystery gnawed at her like acid through hull plating. "This is monumentally stupid," Jex muttered, his forearms working furiously at the security panel outside Archive Vault 7 Alpha. The cretin's natural ability to interface with multiple systems simultaneously made him invaluable for this little expedition. It also made him the most nervous. "If they catch us, we're not just expelled. We're vapor." "Relax, you oversized spider," Nira said, her serpentine form coiled around a ventilation shaft above them. The Solarians' heat sensors swept the corridor continuously. "No patrol for another 17 minutes? Plenty of time to get in, download what we need, and vanish like morning mist." Max 9 floated nearby, his gaseous form rippling with anxiety. "Why exactly are we risking our academic careers for some ancient war records? The Third Expansion ended 200 cycles ago. Ancient history." "Because," Korvac said, watching Jex's progress with growing impatience, "ancient history doesn't get sealed behind quantum locks. Strategic manuals get classified. Casualty reports get restricted. But entire wars, they get archived. They get studied. They don't get erased from existence unless—" "Unless what?" Zara asked. The young Molthan's rocky exterior seemed to shift colors with her mood, currently a deep purple indicating suspicion. "Unless something happened that the Council never wants anyone to know about," Korvac finished. Tom 7, the Aquarian exchange student, bubbled thoughtfully in his environmental suit. "My species has oral traditions about the Third Expansion. Stories passed down in the deep currents. They speak of a species that fought with such intensity that the galaxy trembled." "Myths and stories," Then scoffed. The Valdorians' wolf-like features twisted in disdain. "Every species has legends about the Great Wars, usually starring themselves as the heroes." "Got it," Jex announced. The massive vault door began its slow, silent slide open. "Quantum locks are down. We have maybe 20 minutes before the security cycle resets and someone notices the breach." Voss, their final member and arguably the most reckless, pushed past them all. The Korathan's natural aggressiveness served him well in combat simulations, less well in maintaining subtle infiltrations. 20 minutes? That's barely enough time to scan the surface files. "We need more time." "We get what we get," Korvac said firmly. "Everyone download everything you can access. We'll sort through it later." The archive vault stretched before them like a cathedral of knowledge. Holographic displays flickered to life as their presence triggered the automated systems. Thousands upon thousands of data crystals lined the walls, each one containing the preserved history of galactic conflicts spanning millennia. But at the center of the vault, standing alone on a raised platform, sat a single black crystal. No labels, no classification codes, just a warning symbol that made every species' survival instinct scream in unison. "That has to be it," Nira whispered, her forked tongue tasting the air nervously. "The Third Expansion records." Jex was already interfacing with the nearest access terminal, his 4 hands flying across holographic interfaces. "I'm pulling everything I can find on the war. Battle reports, strategic analyses, casualty figures." His movements suddenly stopped. "This doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" Korvac demanded. "The casualty figures. For a war that supposedly lasted 15 cycles and covered half the galaxy," Jex's voice trailed off. "The coalition forces lost 4 trillion beings. The hegemony lost 3 trillion. But there's a third column here. Another participant. So, multi-sided conflicts happen all the time," Fen said impatiently. Not like this. Jex's natural pallor had somehow become even whiter. The third participant. They lost 11,000. Silence filled the vault like a funeral shroud. 11,000? Dex-9's gaseous form shimmered with disbelief. That's nothing. That's a rounding error in a galactic war. Unless, Korvav said slowly, her tactical mind already racing ahead to terrifying conclusions. They weren't losing. Unless they were winning. Voss snarled. That's impossible. No species could fight two galactic superpowers and suffer casualties that light. The mathematics don't work. The mathematics work perfectly, Tom 7 bubbled grimly. If one side wasn't fighting fair. Download that data crystal, Korvav ordered, pointing at the ominous black crystal in the center of the vault. Whatever's on there is what they really don't want us to see. Jex approached the crystal with visible reluctance. Are we sure about this? That warning symbol, my species has genetic memories of it. It means extinction-level threat. Download it, Korvav repeated. The moment Jex's interface touched the crystal, every alarm in the archive began screaming. Emergency lights bathed the vault in pulsing red. Blast doors began sealing throughout the complex. Well, Nira said with remarkable calm for someone whose academic career had just ended, that's not good. Got it? Jex shouted over the alarms. Data's downloading, but we need to go. Now. They ran through corridors filling with security drones past automated defenses that tracked their movement with lethal precision. Around corners where armed guards were already mobilizing. Somehow, through a combination of Nira's heat-sensing abilities, Voss's combat training and pure dumb luck, they made it back to their dormitory complex. Hours later, huddled in Cora 5's quarters with every privacy screen activated, they finally accessed their stolen treasure. The files were worse than anything they had imagined. This can't be real, Zara whispered, her rocky skin now a sickly yellow-green. These combat reports, they have to be fabricated. Look at this engagement, Fen said, his predatory instincts warring with his growing terror. Battle of Keth Station. Coalition forces, 700 ships, 40 million personnel. Hegemony forces, 900 ships, 55 million personnel. Human forces. He paused. 3 ships, 900 personnel. And the outcome? Korvav asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Total coalition and hegemony casualties. 94 million dead. Station destroyed. Strategic objectives achieved by Fen's voice broke slightly. By human forces. Human casualties. 23 wounded. 0 dead. That's one battle, Dex-9 said frantically. One impossible engagement. It has to be a mistake. A data corruption. Something. Tom 7's environmental suit registered his species equivalent of a shutter. I've accessed the deep files. There are thousands of these reports. Every engagement for 15 cycles follows the same pattern. Overwhelming enemy forces. Minimal human presence. Complete human victory. How? Voss demanded. How does a species of 11 billion fight half the galaxy and win? Nira's forked tongue flicked out nervously. Maybe they had superior technology? Advanced weapons we didn't understand. Jex, still interfacing with the data, made a sound like breaking glass. I found the weapon specifications. Standard kinetic weapons. Chemical explosives. Primitive energy weapons. Their technology was at least 200 cycles behind both the Coalition and Hegemony. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on them. Then how? Korvav asked quietly. I think Tom 7 said slowly. We need to read the battlefield reports. The detailed ones. The ones that describe what actually happened during these engagements. They selected a random battle report. The Battle of Proxima Gate. Routine enough name. Standard strategic objective. The Coalition and Hegemony had been fighting for control of a critical hyperspace junction for 8 cycles when human forces arrived. Korvav began reading aloud, her voice steady despite the growing horror in her mind. Human Commander Sarah Mitchell established contact with both Coalition and Hegemony forces at 14:30 Galactic Standard Time. She requested a temporary ceasefire to discuss territorial claims. Both sides agreed, assuming the humans would be easily intimidated or bribed to withdraw. At 14:35, Commander Mitchell transmitted the following message to both fleets. You have 1 hour to withdraw all forces from this system. Any ships remaining after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The Coalition Admiral's response was laughter. The Hegemony Admiral suggested the humans had malfunctioned brain modules. Both fleets, totaling over 800 ships, prepared to destroy the 3 human vessels as a joint exercise. At 15:35, when both fleets failed to withdraw, the humans opened fire. Korvaev paused, checking the data. This part doesn't make sense. The humans only fired for 17 minutes, then they transmitted another message. What did they say? Nira asked. We have disabled your command ships and primary weapon systems. You now have 30 minutes to withdraw all remaining forces. Ships attempting to re-enter the system will be destroyed. Disabled? Fen snarled. How do you disable 800 ships with 3? It gets worse, Korvac continued reading. The Coalition and Hegemony forces regrouped and launched a coordinated assault on the human positions. The humans responded by destroying exactly 73 ships, 1 from each squadron, surgical strikes that left the rest of both fleets completely intact but utterly defenseless. Then they sent another message. We've now demonstrated our capabilities. Final warning, withdraw or be destroyed. You have 15 minutes. Both admirals refused. Pride, can't show weakness in front of the enemy. So they pressed the attack with everything they had. Voss leaned forward, his aggressive nature fascinated despite his growing fear. And the humans spent the next 8 minutes systematically destroying every ship in both fleets. Perfect targeting. No wasted shots. No survivors who weren't supposed to survive. They left exactly 12 ships intact, 1 from each species, with just enough life support to carry word back to their respective governments. But that's... Zara began. Impossible, Korvax finished. There are 500 reports just like this one. Different battles, different star systems, different enemy forces. The pattern never changes. The humans warn. The enemy ignores the warning. The humans demonstrate their capabilities. The enemy attacks anyway. The humans win. Completely. Efficiently. Terrifyingly. There has to be an explanation, X9 insisted. No species just suddenly develops the ability to fight the entire galaxy and win. Tom 7's environmental suit registered deep distress patterns. I found a strategic analysis report, written by the Joint Coalition Hegemony War Council after the first year of human involvement. What does it say? Korvac asked. It says that humans don't fight wars the way other species do. Every other species in the galaxy follows the same basic patterns. Establish objectives, deploy forces, engage in combat, accept casualties as necessary to achieve goals, negotiate when losses become unsustainable. Humans don't follow those patterns. They don't accept casualties. They don't negotiate. They don't fight for territory or resources or political advantage. They fight for complete victory. And they will pay any price to achieve it except the lives of their own people. The report concludes that humans are fundamentally incompatible with galactic warfare doctrine because they approach combat as a problem to be solved rather than a contest to be won. N's predatory instincts were screaming warnings at him. What kind of problem? The problem of making the enemy stop fighting, Tom 7 replied. Permanently. A new voice cut through their discussion. Cold, mechanical, utterly without emotion. You should not have accessed those files. They spun around to find a figure standing in the doorway. Humanoid, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too still. Eyes that reflected light like a predator's. Human, Voss breathed, his hand automatically reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Ambassador David Kane, the figure said calmly. Earth Diplomatic Corps, I've been monitoring your little expedition since you triggered the archive alarms. You're here to stop us from spreading this information, Korvac said. It wasn't a question. Actually, the human said, settling into a chair with movements too fluid for something his size, I'm here to answer your questions. All of them. Because you've already seen enough to understand that the official story about the Third Expansion War is incomplete. You're going to tell us the truth? Nira asked suspiciously. I'm going to tell you why humans are banned from galactic warfare, David Kane replied. And then you're going to understand why that ban exists, why it will always exist, and why breaking it would be the worst mistake any civilization could ever make. His smile was perfectly human, perfectly friendly, perfectly terrifying. The real question, students, isn't why humans are so effective at war. The real question is why we agreed to stop. Outside their window, the stars seemed to burn a little brighter, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The 9 students sat in absolute silence, each of them beginning to understand that they had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than forbidden knowledge. They had stumbled onto the truth about the species that had voluntarily exiled itself from the galaxy's wars, not because they had lost, but because they had won too completely for anyone's comfort. And now one of them was sitting in their dormitory, smiling that perfectly human smile, ready to explain exactly what that meant. The real education was about to begin. David Kane leaned back in his chair, studying each of the 9 students with those unsettling eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, not the systematic destruction of galactic civilizations. Before we begin, he said, pulling out a small device that hummed with barely contained energy. This conversation never happened. Privacy shields are now active. Recording devices have been disabled. Your dormitory's security feeds will show nothing but 9 students having a study session. You can't just— Voss started, his Corathan aggression flaring. Actually, I can. Kane's smile never wavered. Human technology. We had to get creative when the rest of the galaxy decided our standard military equipment was too dangerous for general use. Corvi felt her tactical mind racing. You're not just a diplomat, are you? Sharp. I like that. Kane nodded approvingly. David Kane, former colonel, Human Expeditionary Forces, current ambassador and chief containment officer for human military activities. My job is to make sure humanity's more enthusiastic tendencies don't accidentally start another galactic incident. Containment officer. Jex's forearms twitched nervously. You contain your own species? We contain ourselves, Kane corrected, because the alternative is letting someone else try to contain us. Trust me, that never ends well for anyone involved. Nira's serpentine form coiled tighter around the ventilation shaft. Those battle reports we read. They can't be accurate. Every single one is completely accurate, Kane said calmly. Authenticated by independent observers from 17 different species. Cross-referenced with Coalition and Hegemony military archives. Verified by quantum forensic analysis. The Galactic Council spent 3 cycles trying to find evidence of falsification or propaganda. They found none, because there was none to find. X9's gaseous form rippled with agitation. Then explain it. How does a species that barely understands hyperspace travel defeat civilizations that have been fighting wars for millennia? Kane stood up, his movement still unnaturally fluid. Wrong question. The right question is, why do you fight wars? To achieve strategic objectives. Corvathive answered automatically. Control territory, acquire resources, eliminate threats, establish dominance. Exactly. You fight to achieve goals. You accept casualties as the price of those goals. You negotiate when the cost becomes too high. You retreat when defeat becomes inevitable. You surrender when continuation becomes pointless. Kane walked to the window, gazing out at the star-filled darkness. Humans don't do any of that. What do you mean? Than asked, his predatory instincts trying to categorize this strange creature. We don't fight to achieve goals. We fight to end fighting. Permanently. The goal isn't victory, it's making sure the fight never happens again. Kane turned back to face them, and something cold flickered behind his eyes. Let me tell you about the Battle of Kepler Station. Not the sanitized version in your archive. The real story. Kepler Station was a civilian mining facility. Population, 4 million beings from 37 different species. The hegemony decided they needed the rare minerals being extracted there. The coalition decided the hegemony couldn't have them. Standard territorial dispute. Both sides deployed massive fleets. The civilians were told to evacuate. Most did. About 400,000 stayed behind, either because they couldn't afford transport or because they thought their homes would be protected. The battle lasted 18 days. Kepler Station was reduced to debris. All 400,000 civilians died in the crossfire. Both fleets claimed victory because they had technically achieved their tactical objectives. The students exchanged glances. This was standard galactic warfare, brutal, but normal. 3 days later, Kane continued. A single human ship arrived at the Kepler debris field. The CSV Relentless, Captain Elena Vasquez commanding. She broadcast a message to both fleets, which were still in system, arguing over salvage rights. The message was very simple. You killed 400,000 civilians. This is unacceptable. You have 1 hour to surrender your commanding officers for trial, or we will consider your entire species complicit in war crimes. Both fleets laughed. Zara said, her rocky skin cycling through confused colors. Both fleets laughed. Kane agreed. 1,400 ships, 60 million trained military personnel, against one ship with a crew of 300. The human captain waited exactly 1 hour. Then she opened fire. Kane pulled up a holographic display that materialized in the center of the room. It showed a three-dimensional tactical map of the Kepler system. Standard Human Engagement Doctrine. Phase 1. Demonstration of Intent. Captain Vasquez targeted the command ship of Ace Fleet. Not to destroy them, but to disable their ability to coordinate their forces. 2 shots. 2 ships crippled. Then she transmitted another message. You now understand that your ships cannot protect you. Surrender your commanding officers, or we will be forced to escalate. The Coalition Admiral ordered all ships to converge on the human vessel. The Hegemony Admiral did the same. 1,400 ships against 1. Kane manipulated the holographic display, showing ship movements. Phase 2. Demonstration of Capability. Captain Vasquez systematically destroyed exactly 1 ship from each squadron in both fleets. Perfect targeting. Minimal expenditure of ammunition. Maximum psychological impact. Then she transmitted a third message. We have now demonstrated that we can destroy any ship we choose. Final warning. Surrender your commanding officers or face complete destruction. Tom 7 bubbled nervously in his environmental suit. They didn't surrender. They didn't surrender, Kane confirmed. Coalition and hegemony doctrine doesn't allow surrender to inferior forces. It's considered a worse failure than death in battle. So Captain Vasquez moved to Phase 3, Problem Resolution. The holographic display exploded into motion. Red lines traced the paths of human weapons fire. Ship after ship disappeared from the tactical map. 43 minutes? Kane said quietly. That's how long it took 1 human ship to destroy 1,400 enemy vessels. Every single weapon was a precision kill shot. Every target was eliminated with the minimum necessary force. Not 1 shot was wasted. Not 1 enemy vessel escaped. At the end, Captain Vasquez transmitted a final message to the 2 surviving ships, which she had deliberately spared to carry word back to their governments. The civilians of Kepler Station have been avenged. Any future targeting of non-combatants will result in similar consequences. The silence in the dormitory was deafening. That's impossible, Voss finally said. The mathematics don't work. 1 ship cannot defeat 1,400 regardless of technology or tactics. You're thinking like a galactic military commander, Kane said. You're thinking about acceptable loss ratios, strategic objectives, rules of engagement. Captain Vasquez wasn't thinking about any of those things. What was she thinking about? Korvac asked. Dead children. The words hit the room like a physical blow. 400,000 civilians died because 2 military commanders decided their strategic objectives were more important than innocent lives. Captain Vasquez took that personally. So did her crew. So did every human who heard about it. Kane began pacing, his movements predatory despite his calm demeanor. You see, humans have this unfortunate psychological quirk. We don't think about warfare in terms of acceptable casualties or strategic gains. We think about it in terms of problems that need to be solved. The problem at Kepler Station wasn't territorial control or resource acquisition. The problem was that 2 military forces had demonstrated they were willing to kill civilians to achieve their goals. So Captain Vasquez solved the problem. By destroying both fleets, Nira said. By destroying both fleets, Kane agreed. Completely. Efficiently. With a level of violence so precise and overwhelming that neither the coalition nor the hegemony ever again targeted civilian populations when humans might be watching. But how? Jex demanded. What technology could possibly allow such dominance? Kane's smile became genuinely amused. Technology? You still think this is about technology? He pulled up another holographic display, this one showing weapon specifications. Standard kinetic railguns, chemical explosive warheads, basic particle beam arrays. Every weapon on that ship was at least a century behind current galactic standard. Then how? Fen snarled, his frustration reaching dangerous levels. Humans fight different because we think different, Kane explained. When you plan a battle, what's the first thing you calculate? Probable casualties. Korvav answered. Acceptable loss ratios based on strategic objectives. Exactly. You plan for your people to die. You accept it as inevitable. You build it into your strategy. Kane's eyes went cold again. Humans don't do that. Ever. The first rule of human military doctrine is that our people go home. All of them. Alive. No exception. That's impossible in warfare, Zura protested. It's impossible in your kind of warfare, Kane corrected. When you accept casualties as inevitable, you fight carefully. You take reasonable risks. You balance aggression with caution. You preserve forces for future engagements. When human soldiers know they're all going home alive, they fight completely differently. They take risks that seem insane because they know their squad mates will cover them. They attempt tactics that appear impossible because they know their officers will support them. They push beyond normal physical and mental limits because they know their mission will succeed. That's still not enough to explain those victory ratios, Vex9 insisted. You're right. Individual bravery and unit cohesion can only account for so much. The real advantage is psychological warfare. Kane manipulated the holographic display again, showing battle footage from various human engagements. Watch the enemy response patterns. In every engagement, there's a moment when the opposing forces realize that humans don't fight like anyone else, that they're not following the rules. What rules? Tom 7 asked. The unspoken rules of galactic warfare. The understanding that battles have limits, that some losses are acceptable, that negotiation is always possible, that there are lines that civilized species don't cross. Humans cross every line, Kane said simply. Not because we're evil or bloodthirsty, but because we don't see lines. We see problems that need solutions. And if the solution requires crossing every line, obliterating every rule, and doing things that other species consider impossible or immoral, well, Kane shrugged. Problems don't solve themselves. Korvav felt her tactical mind struggling to process this information. You're saying humans win through psychological manipulation? I'm saying humans win because we're willing to do whatever it takes to make sure our people go home and the problem gets solved. When your enemies realize that you have no limits, no lines you won't cross, no price you won't pay, Kane paused. They break, not just tactically, psychologically. They look at the impossible things humans accomplish and they stop believing they can win. And once they stop believing they can win, they've already lost. Voss leaned forward aggressively. You're describing terrorism, not warfare. Kane's response was swift and cutting. Terrorism targets innocents to achieve political goals. We target the people responsible for creating problems, and we solve those problems permanently. The difference is significant. Besides, he added with that unsettling smile, terrorism implies we're trying to frighten people into compliance. We're not trying to frighten anyone. We're just very, very good at ending fights. A new holographic display appeared, showing star maps with various systems highlighted in red. After the first year of human involvement in the Third Expansion War, something interesting happened. Wherever human forces were deployed, fighting stopped. Not because we conquered territory, but because the other side stopped shooting at each other. Why? Nira asked. Because they realized that as long as they kept fighting, humans would keep showing up, and when humans show up to stop a fight, the fight ends. Immediately, permanently, usually with very few survivors on either side to complain about the methods used. So they stopped fighting. Korvav asked. They stopped fighting. Coalition and hegemony forces began withdrawing from contested systems the moment they detected human ships in the area. Territorial disputes were suddenly resolved through negotiation instead of bombardment. Civilian casualties dropped to nearly zero. Kane's expression became oddly sad. For the first time in galactic history, there was peace. Real peace. Not the temporary cessation of hostilities that passes for peace between most species, but actual lasting peace. And it terrified everyone. The students looked at each other in confusion. Peace terrified them, X9 asked. Human-enforced peace terrified them, Kane corrected. Because it wasn't their peace. It was peace imposed by a species that didn't follow their rules, didn't share their limitations, and didn't accept their excuses. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. For the first time in recorded history, every member species voted unanimously on a resolution. What resolution? Fen asked. Though his predatory instincts were already telling him he didn't want to know, Kane's smile became genuinely sad. The complete ban on human participation in galactic warfare. Immediate, permanent, non-negotiable. They banned you because you were winning? Zora asked in disbelief. They banned us because we were solving problems they didn't want solved. Kane walked back to the window, gazing out at the stars. The Third Expansion War officially ended the day after the Council vote. Both sides immediately agreed to ceasefire terms that had been proposed and rejected dozens of times during the previous 14 cycles. Why then? Tom 7 asked. Because humans were no longer involved. Because they could go back to fighting their civilized wars with their acceptable casualty rates and their political objectives and their negotiated settlements. Because they could go back to pretending that their way of doing things was the only way. Kane turned back to face the students. And that brings us to why I'm here. Why I'm telling you this story. Why you needed to know the truth. His expression became deadly serious. Because some of you are going to become military officers. Some of you will be responsible for the lives of soldiers and civilians. And some of you eventually will face situations where the normal rules don't work, where acceptable casualties aren't acceptable, where the only solution is to solve the problem completely. When that happens, you'll remember this conversation. You'll remember that there is another way, a human way, and you'll have to decide whether the price of using it is worth paying. What price? Korvav asked. Kane's smile returned, cold and sharp as a blade. The price of becoming something the rest of the galaxy fears more than death itself. The price of becoming human. Outside, the stars continued to burn in the darkness, indifferent to the fears and ambitions of the species that crawled between them. But inside the dormitory, 9 alien students sat in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand why humans had voluntarily exiled themselves from the galaxy's wars. And why, perhaps, that exile was the only thing standing between civilization and something far more terrifying than any war that had ever been fought. The real question wasn't why humans were banned from galactic warfare. The real question was what would happen if that ban ever failed. The silence in the dormitory stretched for long moments before Kane's communication device suddenly erupted in urgent beeping. His casual demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by something cold and predatory that made every student's survival instincts scream warnings. Kane here, he said, activating the device. David, we have a situation. The voice was female, human, and carried the kind of calm that spoke of barely controlled violence. But Hegemony just launched a surprise attack on the Arcturian refugee colonies. Civilian targets. No military objectives. Just massacre. Kane's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Casualties. Preliminary reports suggest 3 million dead, mostly children and elderly. The colonies had no defenses. And the coalition's response. They're mobilizing to take advantage of hegemony forces being deployed elsewhere. Standard opportunistic expansion. They'll be hitting the outer rim systems within hours. Kane closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the 9 students saw something that made their blood freeze. They were no longer looking at a diplomat or even a soldier. They were looking at something that had decided to solve a problem. How long since the attacks began? Kane asked. 47 minutes. Time until council emergency session. They haven't called one. Both sides are claiming the other started it. Standard political theater, while the body count rises. Kane stood up slowly, his movements now carrying a lethal grace that made Voss's Corathan predator instincts curl up in terror. Authorization code? Standing Order 77 Alpha is now active. All containment protocols are suspended. Human expeditionary forces are authorized for immediate deployment. The device went silent. Kane looked at the 9 students with something that might have been pity. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Your education just became significantly more practical than intended. What does that mean? Korfav asked, though her tactical mind was already providing answers she didn't want to accept. It means, Kane said, checking his chronometer, that in approximately 6 hours you're going to witness why the Galactic Council was so terrified of human military capabilities that they banned us from all warfare. The hegemony just broke the fundamental rule that ended the Third Expansion War. They targeted civilians, defenseless civilians, children. Kane's smile was no longer human, it was something older, deadlier, carved from the same darkness that had once made entire species flee at the mention of Earth. And humans don't forgive that kind of problem. Alarms began wailing throughout the Academy complex. Emergency broadcasts flooded the communication networks. The 9 students watched in growing horror as reports poured in from across the galaxy. The hegemony attack on the Arcturian colonies was even worse than initially reported. 7 million dead. Entire family groups exterminated. Orbital bombardment of hospitals and schools. The kind of systematic slaughter that violated every civilized norm of warfare. The coalition response was swift and predictable. Their fleets were already moving to exploit hegemony weaknesses, turning a massacre into the opening move of another galactic war. This is exactly what happened before, Nero whispered, her serpentine form coiled tight with anxiety. The Third Expansion War started the same way, civilian casualties escalating into full galactic conflict. Except this time, Kane said quietly, humans are involved from the beginning. But you're banned from warfare, Chex protested, his forearms working frantically at his data interfaces. The Council resolution is absolute. Any human military action would what? Kane asked. Restart the war? There's already a war. 7 million civilians are already dead. The coalition and hegemony are already mobilizing for full-scale conflict. The only question now is how long it takes us to stop it. Kane activated his communication device again. Fleet status report. Human Expeditionary Force Alpha is departing Earth space, ETA to hegemony core worlds, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Beta Force is moving to intercept coalition expansion fleets. Gamma Force is securing the Arcturian system. Rules of engagement? Standing Order 77 Alpha. No survivors among command personnel responsible for civilian targeting. Complete cessation of hostilities is the only acceptable outcome. Kane closed the communication channel and turned back to the students. And now you get to see what your professors could never teach you. What it looks like when humans stop pretending to be civilized. The Academy's main viewing screens activated, showing real-time footage from across the galaxy. The students watched in stunned silence as the scale of human response became clear. Ships were emerging from hyperspace throughout known space. Not the 3-ship formations that had dominated the Third Expansion War. Entire fleets. Hundreds of vessels moving with a coordination and purpose that defied everything the students thought they knew about warfare. How many ships do humans have? X9 asked, his gaseous form rippling with disbelief. All of them, Kane answered simply. What does that mean? Fen demanded. It means that for the past 200 cycles, while the rest of the galaxy has been fighting their civilized little wars and maintaining their standing armies, humans have been preparing for the day someone would force us to solve the problem of galactic warfare permanently. The viewing screens showed human fleets arriving at their targets. The response from coalition and hegemony forces was swift and violent. Thousands of ships on each side moved to engage the human forces. The students expected to see massive space battles, epic confrontations between huge fleets. the kind of spectacular warfare that filled their tactical simulation. Instead, they watched something that redefined their understanding of what warfare could be. Human ships didn't engage in prolonged battles. They didn't maneuver for advantage or fight for position. They arrived, transmitted a single message, waited exactly 60 seconds, then began systematically destroying everything that hadn't immediately surrendered. Battle Group 7 has reached the Hegemony Third Fleet, the voice from Kane's communicator reported. Admiral requesting surrender of all personnel responsible for Arcturian colony operations. Hegemony response. Standard defiance. They're moving to attack formation. Proceed with problem resolution. On the viewing screen, the students watched 12 human ships face off against 300 Hegemony vessels. The enemy fleet began its attack run with confidence born of overwhelming numerical superiority. 43 seconds later, the Hegemony Third Fleet ceased to exist. Not destroyed in the conventional sense. Eliminated. Every ship reduced to component atoms with surgical precision. No wasted shots. No collateral damage. No survivors. That's impossible, Zara breathed, her rocky skin cycling through colors that had no names. That's humans, Kane corrected. But the technology gap isn't that significant. Tom 7 bubbled frantically. Your weapons systems are centuries behind current galactic standard. Kane's laugh was genuinely amused. You're still thinking about this wrong. You're thinking about weapons and technology and tactical advantages. Humans don't win because we have better guns. We win because we've spent 200 cycles solving the problem of warfare itself. The viewing screens showed similar scenes playing out across the galaxy. Human forces arriving. Enemy fleets moving to engage. Brief, one-sided encounters that ended with total human victory and complete enemy annihilation. Every ship in those fleets, Kane continued, was designed for one purpose: ending fights. Not winning battles, not achieving strategic objectives, ending fights permanently. Every weapon system was optimized for complete problem resolution. Every tactical doctrine was refined through endless simulation and analysis. Every crew member was trained to a single standard: solve the problem, bring everyone home alive. And the problem, Kane's expression became deadly serious, is that some species apparently need to be reminded why civilian casualties are unacceptable. More reports flooded in. Coalition forces were withdrawing from their expansion operations. Hegemony commands were broadcasting surrender requests. Across the galaxy, the fighting was simply stopping. How long? Core 5 asked, her tactical mind struggling to process the speed of human victory. Coalition forces ceased all offensive operations. 97 minutes after human deployment, Kane reported. Hegemony High Command surrendered unconditionally 134 minutes after we eliminated their third fleet. The war is over. Already? Nira asked in disbelief. The fighting was always going to be brief, Kane explained. The real war was fought during the 200 cycles between the Third Expansion War and today. The war of preparation, the war of development, the war of becoming something that could solve the problem of galactic warfare permanently. Today was just the final examination. Kane activated his communicator again. Final casualty reports. Human forces: 17 wounded, 0 dead. Enemy forces: complete elimination of all ships and personnel that refuse surrender demands. Civilian casualties: 0 additional beyond the Arcturian colonies. Total time from first human deployment to complete cessation of hostilities: 2 hours 41 minutes. Kane closed the communication channel and looked at the 9 students. And that is why humans are banned from galactic warfare. Because you win too quickly, Voss asked. Because we don't win, we solve. Winning implies there might be a rematch. When humans solve a problem, there is no rematch. Kane walked back to the window, gazing out at the stars. The species responsible for the Arcturian massacre no longer exist as a military force. Their leadership has been eliminated. Their ships have been destroyed. Their ability to threaten civilians has been permanently removed. The coalition forces that tried to exploit the crisis have learned that opportunistic expansion in the presence of human forces is a fatal mistake. And every other species in the galaxy has been reminded why the ban on human military involvement exists. So what happens now? Korvath asked. Now, Kane turned back to face them. Now you 9 students have a choice to make. What kind of choice? Jax asked nervously. You've seen what humans are really capable of. You've witnessed the true scope of our military development. You understand why the rest of the galaxy fears us. You can report what you've learned. Demand that the Council take action against humanity for breaking the warfare ban. Push for stronger containment measures or even military action against Earth. Kane's smile became sharp as a blade. Or you can understand that some problems require human solutions. That sometimes the only way to protect innocent lives is to permanently eliminate the threats against them. You can choose to become part of the solution. What does that mean? Fen asked, his predatory instincts warring with his growing terror. It means that humans aren't the only species that can think like humans. We've been waiting 200 cycles for other species to evolve beyond their acceptance of acceptable casualties. Waiting for species that value innocent life more than political objectives. Species that understand that some problems can only be solved through complete resolution. Species that are willing to pay the price of becoming something the galaxy fears. Jiang activated a new holographic display showing star charts with certain systems highlighted. These are human training facilities, located in neutral space, outside galactic jurisdiction. We've been developing new military doctrines, new technologies, new ways of thinking about warfare. Not just for humans, for any species willing to learn. Learn what? Bex9 asked. Learn to fight like humans. Learn to think like humans. Learn to solve problems the way humans solve problems. Learn to value the lives of innocents more than the comfort of civilized warfare. The students looked at each other in stunned silence. You're recruiting us, Nara said finally. I'm offering you a choice, Kane corrected. The galaxy is going to face more crises like today, more species that think civilian casualties are acceptable, more conflicts that require permanent solutions. You can choose to handle those crises the traditional way. Accept casualties as inevitable. Fight civilized wars with civilized rules. Negotiate with people who murder children. Or you can choose to handle them the human way. Solve the problems, permanently. Korvath felt her tactical mind racing through the implications. If we accept this training, we become like you. Our own species would fear us. Yes, Kane said simply. Our governments would try to contain us. Yes, we would be exiles in our own civilizations. Yes. But Kane continued. You would also be the people your civilizations call when the problems become too big for civilized solutions. When the threats become too dangerous for acceptable casualties. When innocent lives matter more than political comfort. You would be the people who make sure that what happened at the Arcturian colonies never happens again. Kane checked his chronometer. I need your decisions now. The training ships are leaving for neutral space in 6 hours. Anyone who wants to learn the human way of warfare needs to be on them. And if we refuse? Voss asked. Then you return to your normal lives, your normal studies, your normal acceptance of the way things are. And the next time someone decides to massacre civilians, you'll watch the reports and feel appropriately outraged and helpless while politicians debate appropriate responses. Until eventually someone calls the humans to solve the problem. One by one, the students made their choices. Korvath stepped forward first. I've spent my life studying tactics and strategy. I thought I understood warfare. And today I learned that I understand nothing. Teach me to solve problems. Jex was next, his forearms trembling but determined. I've always believed that technology could solve any problem. Today I learned that the problem isn't technology, it's the willingness to use it properly. Teach me to think like a human. One by one they chose. 7 of the 9 students stepped forward. Only Fen and Bex9 remained behind, too afraid of what they might become. Kane nodded approvingly. 7 is a good number. Enough to make a difference when you return to your species. Not enough to be seen as a direct threat. What happens to us? Zara asked. You learn. You train. You become something new. Something that your species has never seen before. You become the people who solve problems that civilized society can't handle. You become human. Kane led the 7 volunteers out of the dormitory, leaving Fen and Bex-9 behind with their choices and their fears. As they walked through the academy corridors, Nira asked the question that was haunting all of them. What's the real price of becoming human? Kane paused at the academy's main entrance, looking back at the institution that had tried to teach warfare through simulations and theory. The real price, he said quietly, is that once you learn to solve problems the way humans solve problems, you can never go back to accepting that some problems are unsolvable. You can never again watch innocent people die and tell yourself that there was nothing you could do. You can never again accept that some prices are too high to pay for peace. Outside, the human transport ships were waiting. Sleek, deadly vessels that had been designed for one purpose, carrying the people who would solve the galaxy's problems. As the 7 students boarded the ships, they understood that they were leaving more than just their academy behind. They were leaving their old selves, their old limitations, their old acceptance of the way things had always been. They were becoming something new, something necessary, something terrifying. They were becoming human. And across the galaxy, in council chambers and military headquarters, in civilian shelters and refugee camps, the word was spreading. The humans were no longer contained. The humans were teaching others. And the age of acceptable casualties was ending, whether the galaxy was ready or not. In the vast darkness between the stars, the transport ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying their precious cargo toward a future that would either save or damn them all. The choice had been made. The real war was just beginning. And this time, humans wouldn't be fighting alone.